Hello, I'm Bob Sulkin. I'm a photographer, and I taught photography at Hollins University in Roanoke from 1980 to 2019 when I retired. And I'm really thrilled to be here at the Allegheny Highlands Art Center and to talk about my work a little bit. And I'm very appreciative to have a show here, and I think it looks really good.
It turns out Bob is a history graduate from the University of North Carolina. Graduated a while back in time for the digital revolution. So he has actually been filming in film and in digital, and that transition was not easy for a lot of photographers. What you'll see in the show, I'm assuming, Bob, are going to be a combination of film and digital. Mm-hmm. And he'll talk about some of his processes, but mostly maybe about the series and how they evolved over a period of time. And to me, a series is the nut to crack, trying to find something that ties together over a period of time. You want to take us to the first image?
Oh, sure. Well, I thought the show actually is a compilation of things from over 40 years. I kind of cherry-picked my work for the show, but there are some common threads. And I can touch on a few things, starting with some very early work. If we can start with this hand grid. These photographs were made in 1979, my first year in Iowa City. And I was a transplant from North Carolina to Iowa, and I felt sort of a cultural shock. And at the time I was thinking of changing aspects of my work. I'd been doing street photography. And I was, quite frankly, at a real loss of what to do. And I started, during the year, out of desperation, started imposing my hand into the Iowa landscape and then in places in North Carolina also. And I never thought I'd see the work. The second year in graduate school, my work changed quite a bit. And I had totally forgotten about this work, and I was getting ready for my retrospective at Hollins and came across them again. They looked kind of interesting, and I put them in a grid. And thinking back on it, it was the first time that I think I went from what I would call making a photograph as opposed to taking a photograph. So instead of extracting something from the external world and just capturing it, I was actually participating in the making of it. And it turns out that would kind of sustain me for over 40 years. So looking back, it becomes a seminal image in that way. And surprisingly, I had no fun doing it, but looking back, it's a little bit fun to look at now. Moving forward just a little bit, when I came to Hollins, there are a number of things that kind of influenced my work. And one of them was when I arrived at Hollins, I was given a studio space in a falling apart old Victorian house. And I had never worked in a studio before, and I ended up buying a small 4x5 view camera and just kind of fell in love with the process. Initially, I liked the studio because I could control the environment. I could work when I wanted to work. I was very busy at Hollins all the time. And so if I wanted to work in the evening or on a rainy day on the weekend, the studio was there. I wasn't dependent on weather and things like that. And this is I started by doing very simple still lives that were a little bit influenced by my interest in modernism, which I learned about in graduate school. I was, as I think has been pointed out, I was an undergraduate history major. So when I went out to Iowa City, I had never studied art at all. And I was forced really to make up some undergraduate deficiencies and was kind of immersed in art history. And I was very much affected by, or very much impressed with modern European painting, the idea that the interplay of shape and form could have an emotional effect. And I started, my early 80s still lives were emblematic of a photograph like this that I call a ladder. And I took a piece of old packing material that looked to me like a ladder, and I draped it over a couple of mirrors.
Why Iowa? Or Ohio, whatever it was.
Oh, well, I went to Iowa because they let me in.
Okay.
Basically. I did not have an undergraduate art degree.
Right.
And so to apply for an MFA without an undergraduate art degree is very unusual. And I had been sort of self-taught doing street photography, so I sent them a portfolio, and they accepted me based on that, I thought. But when I got out there, to my great surprise, they wanted me to make up my lack of an undergraduate art degree by taking the equivalent of their undergraduate art degree at the same time I was taking my graduate work.
Okay.
So I got a lot of art
And it wasn't necessarily specifically photography?
Oh, no, not at all. This is the School of Art and Art History. And what I would tell young photographers is that I think I was probably influenced as much, if not more, by taking drawing, which I loved, and studying art history than I was what happened in the photography.
And
so I think it's really important. Photographers oftentimes tend to think they only like photography.
Yeah.
But immersion in the other art forms, I think, is very important. I used to push my students to take as much other mediums as they could, and also art history.
And so jumping forward a few years, when you went to Hollins,
right,
was that specifically for teaching photography?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
It was, yes,
Okay.
yes.
And then one more thing about your self-taughtedness.
Right.
Did you completely self-teach yourself, or did you have a mentor who taught you something about the darkroom?
Yes, I basically was self-taught, which I would not particularly recommend to anybody. One of the things I mused about was that my students at Hollins in intro photography, they knew more and was doing better 6 weeks into the class than it took me 3 or 4 years to figure it out, because you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Image that I call composition 337, which is kind of just a made-up number. And it's a little bit more emblematic of my later constructions. And I took great pleasure in taking recycled materials and transforming them. And in this case, some of the objects in here, we always want to know what the objects are. The centerpiece is a toy that my son had that ran little cars around it. And it was in bright colors like red, yellow, and blue, but in black and white it transforms. And other things, tinker toys and a plunger of some sort for chemicals, for lawn chemicals. And what I loved to do was imagine that I was an inventor of some kind, and trying to create an environment where the viewer might get lost in what the object is or what the invention is. And the challenge of tabletop, this kind of photography, is to make it seem like it's its own world. For example, that you might come across it in the basement of a museum of bad science or something. Scanners are wonderful cameras. They operate like an 8x10 camera. If we could walk over, I could show you the paint lid.
Oh, God, that was great. I love the paint lid.
Yeah, okay, so why don't we walk over here? And this is a series I did, from a series I did. I probably have 15 or 20 of them, where I took old paint lids and from paint cans in my basement. And I actually had a friend who just purchased a building downtown in Roanoke that had been a paint store. So she had like 60 or 70 gallons of paint, and I got the lids off all of them. I started scanning them, and then I put them in my own little environments. So I create some of the background myself. But if you take a close-up look at this, the detail is incredible. And it's almost like photographing with high-resolution scanners. It's almost like using a view camera.
It looks like,
so it's quite remarkable.
It looks like the shot from the top of somebody's brain with little impulses going off.
Right. So it's a lot of my work has to do with the issue of transformation, how one thing becomes something else.
Okay.
Like a piece of stuffing or packing material becomes a ladder, or in this case, I think a brain scan is great. I also thought it looked a little bit like it's solar, like planets or stars or something like that. A series called Earth Poems, and these are basically a continuation of the idea of the constructed image, and that I'm basically constructing them in Photoshop. So I take some element of a landscape, and I work it. In this case, I'm working with digital cameras when I shoot. So these are my digital little SLR type camera, and then I put them in Photoshop, and then I use various sundry tools in Photoshop to start from scratch and just to rebuild a landscape. And like a lot of my work has an oblique reference to cultural or societal issues, and I see these as a little bit of a metaphor for the transformations that are taking place in the planet, either with development or with it's more of a climate control kinds of things like that.
Hi, this is Nancy Newhard with Allegheny Highlands Arts and Crafts Center. I'm here with photographs by Jim Knipe from Radford. He's got 2 series here. One is called his Paris portfolio, which was the result of a 4-month residency in Paris. And the first 2 pieces we're going to talk about are from that section. They are both arch pieces to me. He just identifies them as Paris portal with a number, so they don't have individualized numbers. But when I hung the show, what I thought was interesting was the way that the tree form and a piece of construction sort of framed out the cathedral behind it, and how the arch on one of the bridges frames out the Seine on the other piece. with another bridge behind it and the idea of another archway back there framing something else. His pictures from Paris are not the average tourist photo. They are places that you might see if you lived there, alleyways and windows and backyards of residents who live in the city. I think people will want to see the entire show, but we know we can't do that in a quick video, so the exhibit will be up until July 29th. So I hope people will come and see the rest of it. One of my other favorite pieces in the Paris portfolio is of a store window with mannequin legs dressed in some very outrageous stockings. Jim Knipe has also been photographing for more than 40 years, like Bob, and so many of the pieces he's taken have been worked into a series. These next pieces are from a series called Close to Home, where he's photographed the land as the man-made aspects of it have been encroached upon by Virginia creeper and the ever-present kudzu, sort of a suggestion of the transitional quality of life on the land and the buildings that live on it. One of my favorite pieces is of an old building that's just deteriorating on the outside, but must have been a marvelous building once upon a time. And then there are a number of pieces that show the buildings that are being enveloped by the vines as they grow. Jim has also lived on 4 different rivers, at least, over his life. Now living in Radford, of course, he's near the Roanoke River and the New River, and so he has a number of pieces that are shots from along the riverside where the fishermen may travel paths and wander through the vines as they cover up the trees.